quote to cash with Salesforce integration. So to set the stage a little bit around this is, if in building your true quote to cash, as your company grows through that life cycle we just talked about, the volume and complexity increases. And manual efforts can get in the way and really slow down handling, being able to deal with that volume, which is why we've built this integration. So it allows sales and finance to work together to get that complete contract and revenue and cash life cycle that we just laid out. We're going to have a little figurative of the narration behind this of a great SaaS leader, Emma. And Emma's going to be managing her opportunities in Salesforce. So when that deal is closed, by using us, that contract information gets automatically sent to us in Sage Intacct, so that finance can know what came off the order and do the billing and the revenue recognition processes. Again, having that automated, but being able to put in checks and balances where they want, and sending that detail back to Salesforce so that Emma, when logging in, can see the status of her customer accounts in Salesforce. Here's another pictorial graphic representation on the left-hand side. In Salesforce, that opportunity object turned into a contract object, and then moving into the Sage Intacct contract object, and then underneath that, additional add-ons and upsells occurring, and thus ability to be able to handle the billing and the revenue. So with that, I'd like to transition over to John and showing it come alive. So John, take it away.
Thank you, David. As you were laying out, and as we're going to go through and see in product today, sales folks manage their opportunities in Salesforce, and when the deal is won, new subscription contracts automatically make their way to Intacct, where the finance team can pick them up and start the work on downstream processes, such as billing and revenue recognition. This is facilitated through the Intacct Salesforce integration, which is a managed application between the two companies, going back a long history between us, going back to 2006. And it is a managed application on the Salesforce App Exchange. So what this means is easier administration and maintenance for you over time as your organization grows, scales, and changes. So up front, getting set up and running on the Intacct Salesforce integration is just as easy as configuring both sides. So there's a component of the configuration that takes place in Salesforce, allowing you to tailor the integration to how you might be using Salesforce specifically in your organization. What are the critical points at which you would say perhaps opportunities at a closed won stage are those that are ready to be synchronized over to Intacct? What other key pieces of data are important to you in your Salesforce instance? Are you managing your renewals out of Salesforce as well as your new sales and upsells and add-ons that we also want to go ahead and synchronize and move between Intacct and Salesforce? So there's the component of it related to Salesforce, again allowing you to leverage Salesforce's flexibility and tailor your sales cycles to how it is that you engage with your customers. But then there's also the Intacct side of things as well. So there's another configuration aspect to it on the Intacct side that gets into the key pieces of data that are going to go back and forth. Things like your accounts, your contacts, and very importantly, your products. So as we'll see, Intacct and Salesforce working together to bring this automation of data flow back and forth between the two systems and taking into account the flexibility that needs to exist. Perhaps there are critical elements related to certain objects in your Salesforce instance that you want to bring over to Intacct beyond the basics of name and address. You can establish those custom mappings in real time between your Intacct instance, your Salesforce instance, and then designate which way the data should flow. Is this information that's coming from Salesforce to Intacct? Is it information that's going to be managed by the team working in Intacct that should be updated in Salesforce? Or is it something that potentially might be managed bidirectionally and whomever is responsible for managing the record in their particular system of comfort is doing that, knowing that it's mapped back and forth to the two critical systems in the quote-to-cash cycle. One of the critical components to that, obviously, is the products and services that you sell. And so as these are mapped to Intacct and Salesforce, it's not just about making sure that we have a reciprocal record, but it's how do we also help automate some of the downstream aspects of it. So as our products are set up and established in Intacct, we can be mindful of the downstream flows for those particular aspects of billing, revenue recognition, et cetera. So as we've set up, in this case, our item 110, our extension pack, that might be something we add to our deals, part of that setup of that item is to go ahead and start to designate, how do we typically bill this? How do we typically recognize this? This allows these values to default in, be managed by the users throughout the cycle, whether that's the sales or sales ops team in Salesforce, whether it's the finance team as this transaction lands in Intacct, but the ability for these to further enhance the workflow on both sides. So as we see here, our extension pack, noting billing for a year, we would see that same thing reflected if we were to look at a particular opportunity in Salesforce showing the use of that particular data. So an opportunity for Dickinson PLC that might have that particular product on it would reflect those values as they were designated in the setup, mapped over with the ability to change it. So that billing template being effective for 1 year, but available to be changed if it were to make sense to. So what this does is it allows those users who are primarily working in Salesforce, managing those opportunities, associating those opportunities with contracts, and those contracts ultimately becoming subscription records over in Intacct to be managed for the billing, financial, recording, reporting activities, to do so with a high level of automation, high level of oversight, and visibility across the organization. Now, one other key element that the Salesforce Intacct integration brings to it throughout the course of this is the notion of collaboration. So as different users might be looking at different components within Salesforce, so in this case we have another rep in our organization, Max, who's taking a look at his account for Burlington Textiles, we start to see the visibility that we get across both platforms. The ability for Max to look at Burlington and see the opportunities, see the contracts that have been created, and then also Intacct feeding the information back as we go through the process of invoicing and receiving payments from our customers. So the ability for these users to see and work with this data. So Max might actually go ahead and pull up that invoice record as it was fed back from Intacct. He has the ability to obviously see the status, go ahead and take a look at the details of this invoice, or if needed, even print a copy of it that he can send out to his customer if in fact they were to need one, or he needed it to uplift a conversation that he's having about status of the account, opportunities for upsell or cross-sell. It now becomes a self-service prospect for that rep to do themselves. But they also might have some collaboration with others in the organization, and this can happen across platform as well. So if we were to go ahead and take a look, we might see that Emma and Max have had a conversation about this invoice where Max lets Emma know that the customer requested a copy and he sent it over, taking care of it directly out of Salesforce. Emma might see this and participate in this through Salesforce, but she's also able to do so directly through her Intacct Collaborate function. So we would see all these collaborative messages viewed back and forth between Salesforce and Intacct, allowing both sides of the organization to work together seamlessly and work collaboratively to get the job done better and faster.